Hi guys, we'll wait for I guess maybe 3 more minutes and then we'll start. It's been a long time since our previous session. Got a bit busy, so today we'll catch up with everything and I'll even show you some new things. I also have a demo app so we can look at the demo app and then we can just have like a nice conversation at the end. So you can tell me like what type of apps you like to use or do you want to build in the future, and we can like talk about different ideas and maybe like formulate plans, and that's just the plan for today. So okay, I see some new names. Jaskaran, is this your first time joining us with this Android development workshop?
Yes,
Yes. Okay, can I know how much of Android development do you know?
basically, almost. I'm just a beginner.
Okay, you're a beginner. Do you have Android Studio installed?
Yeah, I did install Android Studio and IntelliJ.
Okay, great, great. Okay, we'll start maybe now and let's, yeah. So for today, okay, so if you guys have Android Studio installed, maybe you can like go through this. We don't have that much time, so I wouldn't like do like a code run. I'll just like talk about Android development and all the recent updates and how the workflow works these days, so you guys can get a basically an idea of how Android development works. So basically, when you're doing Android development, Android is an ever-changing field. Every like few months, we get new updates, and the packages, like packages and libraries, those get deprecated, and Google makes new ones. So it's always the role of the Android developers to be up to date with what code is going to work and not. So we'll always have to refer to the developer android.com's documentation, and maybe I don't know if you guys have done that much Android development, but sometimes this code labs also might be deprecated. So like, so just like make sure that when you're doing an application, before you start, make sure your Android Studio is running. So like, okay, let me open Android Studio. This is basically, okay, I have a demo app here. Let me close all of these. So this is a normal interface that you'll see. Like if you open a new app, this is an interface. You see your files this side, you see the top menu. This interface is newly updated, I think, with Android 16, and the entire Android Studio interface got updated. So when you're making a new application, you want to make sure that your Android Studio is in the latest version. So always keep your Android Studio updated. If you're going to use a previous version of Android Studio, the SDKs and the AGP, Android Gradle, those might be like deprecated because lower versions will not run. So we always just need to keep our Android Studio updated. So to do that, you just go to androidstudio.com and click on install. And if it has the same version that you're currently using, then you're fine. You're good to go. Otherwise, just update it. So right now, I guess we are using Android Studio Meerkat. So if you're into Android, you know that every like version of Android Studio is represented by some type of animal or figure. So I think the previous version was Ladybug. If you're on Ladybug, then you have to update to Meerkat because Meerkat is the current version. And Android 16 just came out. So for the past like 2-3 years, we have been using Android 15. Android 16 came out, I think, last month itself. And the only difference between Android 16 and Android 15 is the new Gemini API that's inside the development program. Like that's like the most important part, because if you see here this icon in the very bottom, that's our AI code companion. It's powered by Gemini 2.5, I guess. And this AI like companion, you might be seeing it like with GitHub Copilot and I think Code Blocks or something. All of these AI companions always have like one feature that could like scrutinize your entire development process, is that it's security. So if an AI is like watching what you're coding and helping you code, you also like have a risk of sharing your data with that AI, and that AI is then feeding it to the companies, and the companies are then getting your data. So with Android 16, Android has promised us that this Gemini companion is very safe to use and it's secure. So the data that it's using to help you code is not going to go to the company. It will be encrypted and used only in your local Android studio. So that's the main feature of Android 16. With Android 15, I think that came out a few years ago, maybe last year, earlier last year. We had this feature which is like device managers. So you could like connect your device. Like we always used to connect our own devices to Android Studio. That's almost always preferred as to using an emulator, because when you're using your own device, you get the feeling of how the app will actually run. Emulator, there's always that block that you feel because it's on a virtual device. So if you don't know, this is the emulator. So I have a Pixel 8 API, but you can also connect your own device using USB or Wi-Fi. And from that, it has like a screencasting feature. Okay, so let me just connect my device. Okay, so my device is loaded here. And yeah, this is actually my real phone. So our real phone can be controlled from our computer itself. So these are my apps, and yeah. So this is a new feature that came out with Android 15, and for now, we're going to be just looking at how you can build a good UI with Android. I wouldn't go much to the back end because I feel we're all like beginners here. So front end is good and easy to start. So what I recommend is going to the developer.android.com site, and then you go to Code Labs. So there's a lot of interactive like code labs which you can refer to and complete, and that gives you a feeling of how to make Android applications. So yeah, there's a bunch of like code labs you can go through. You can add Gemini into your application using the Gemini API that comes free with this entire Android Studio. Excuse me. And then we also have connection with Firebase. Firebase is the database. It's a NoSQL database that you can connect with your app. And Firebase is the most used with Android development. You could also use like Room SQL, Mongo, Postgre. Those also work, but as much as the documentations like you to use, it's always Firebase. So when you're just beginning, always like do what is most recommended by the actual creators. And there's also these wearable, hearable devices that Android operating systems can run on. So I don't know if you guys know, but recently there's something called Project Muhan, and Muhan is like it's like Google's version of Vision OS by Apple. So it's like that VR like headset that emerges in real life. So it's like XR experience. So for because Android is pushing XR right now, so like they basically believe that in a few years we don't need to use our smartphones anymore. So what's the entire point of Android development if you're not going to use your smartphone? The reason is because they are pushing XR right now, and with XR you can just use their headset, which is like they're currently working on, and different like wearable items like glasses, headsets, and all those things. So we won't bother with the future right now. Okay, we'll just go to this plain old Android Studio, Android development with Kotlin and Jetpack Compose. You guys are aware of what Jetpack Compose is? It's been out for I guess the past 3 years. Can I get a hands up or thumbs down if you know what Jetpack Compose is? Yep. Just put a thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you know what Jetpack Compose is? No. Okay. So basically, in web development, if you can see, you have your front end and your back end, and we use two different coding languages for both the front end purposes, which we use HTML and CSS, and for backend we use JavaScript, right? I hope you all are aware of that. But in Android, until very recently, we also had like a similar process where Kotlin was used for the backend and navigation, and XML, extensible markup language, was used for the front end, like styling and just similar to how CSS and HTML was. But then I think 3 years ago, Android said you don't need to do that anymore. We are introducing Jetpack Compose, where your front end and back end can be all developed in one coding base, one coding language. That is Kotlin. So Kotlin is like a upgraded version of Java, and with that we can do Android development very easily and in a streamlined process, because now we don't need to do like both Kotlin and XML. We can just do everything in Kotlin. And you might be wondering, with how do we segregate what's the logic and what is the design, and that is segregated using the compose functions. So there's like this function with which we write with at function. Let me pull up one example of a compose function. Okay, this is like a chatting app I have here. So it's like the UI of a chatting app. It has navigation and state management built into it. So we can just see one of them. Okay, here. This works. So if you can see here, this add composable, that is a compose function, and that's used for doing the front end, the UI, the visual development, and not really with the logic. So, and even with Android Studio, you can see that this function shows this much, which is part of the app. I'll later show you the entire app, but yeah. So that's in a gist what compose is. And when we're using compose, we have to always make our an add preview function. And this add preview, this is what helps you to see it on your Android Studio interface itself, so you can see what's happening. I think in previous versions of Android, we had to do it in the XML side, and in the XML you can see the preview. But here, just directly in our Kotlin code, we can see the preview of what we're building. Yeah. So let's see what this code lab is doing. It's basically layouts in Compose. So in Compose and in Android development, we have UI, the user interface. User interface is something that the users interact with in their Android applications. And when we're interacting with Android applications, uh, every time we do a button or function, like anything we do on the application, something changes, right? Maybe if I click a button, the button has a navigation, or if I click the button, then a new image pops up. That's all different UI changes that are happening, and these changes are called as UI states. And whenever our UI is updated, the state also updates. So they're like these functions that help you with updating your UI states. And when you're like beginner developer, Android provides you with this UI toolkit, which is what we mostly use. So unless you're like a big brand and you have your own theme and styling, you don't probably won't use the UI toolkit. But when you're just building basic apps, this is what we'll start with. So if you can see here, they have this application, which is I think it's a yoga application that helps you train your body. So they have like these different like exercises, and they have these collection of audios. So yeah, it's like a wellness app, and this is what we'll see how Android themselves are building this. So before building your own app, you'll have to see how the pros are doing it. You can't just like jump in head on and just do something. Always refer to previous examples. Okay, you can also like see their code here. We'll skip that for now. Start with a plan. We'll start with by implementing the portrait design of this app. So before you start with the app, you always need to know what you want in your app. So you have to make a design, and this design is just UI UX designing. And so from there, we know that which icon, which widget, everything goes where. So always make sure you have a clean and usable design. Don't make your designs too cluttered or don't make them too sparse. There's a perfect balance between a bad UI and a good UI. So before going to development, if you are making your own app, always start with the UI. If you're making an app for somebody else, they'll probably tell you like the framework of how the app is going to be. So when they are working with clients, they would give you like, oh, my app needs a feedback form. My app needs a new like message button. So they would tell you the things that they need, and then you would have to figure out how to streamline that like options, those widgets perfectly in your application. And that's how you make the client's apps. So yeah. So in here, this app is separated into three, I think four parts. Okay, yeah, four parts. First one is a search bar, and this search bar is like basically just where you search for a particular item. And then they have this horizontal scrolling section. They have this, which is another like list of items collection, and every like part is segregated into different parts, so you have to break down your design as well, and that's how we build upon each other. This building upon each other is called a fragment tree. So just like how trees have branches and every branch has another branch, and that's basically how the UI also works. So we have a base, and then we have our few items, and in those items we have different options, and that also forms your tree. So it's like a scaffold. So scaffolds are basically things that are used in like construction, right? You have the rods which are aligned, and that's how the building is built on top of it. So just like that, whenever you're building anything, you have your foundation, and Android works pretty much the same way. Okay, this shows how the search bar was made. So this is a composable feature that's already inside Jetpack Compose. You just have to like call that function and then you get it. And then you have to put it in the specific style and size that you want. And this function is called the text field. So in the text field is where you write your text. And the search button is called the search bar. So that's how you search for things. And then the options come below it. And every time we give the user gives an input, that input is a variable, and that variable is also stored. So we store it in a form that's called value, and when the value changed, our modifier gets also updated, and this modifier goes to our search bar, and the search bar searches for the modifier, and then according to if it found it or not, it will give you the options, like how similar, like, so like when you're Googling, you see like the options and how similar it is to your input. That is what it's searching for here. Okay, someone has a query. Aditya saw. Okay, so you are a new student. Okay, I have this session like recorded. So once I'm done, you can just go back to the beginning. I have previous videos as well. And so just for beginners, you just look at these examples. Okay, this is a kind of advanced example, but in this Android Code Labs, you'll see very basic, maybe like there's something called get started with your first app. Yes, create your first Android app. This is what I recommend for like beginners to start with. So maybe I'll share this on the uh, chat. So start with this. Just follow its instructions. Make sure you have Android Studio updated, and it's very easy. So if you have any like troubles or bugs, you can ask me or ask some AI. Either works. So yeah. So good luck with that. Continue. Yeah, no problem. So now we have our search bar. So that's how like functions work. So the input is stored, the input goes to the different function, and this function searches for that particular item in our search. Okay, so this all these functions go inside our main activity. Main activity is like in like Java, we have our main class. Even I think basically every single programming language you have your main class that where the code starts running from. So so for that also in Android also we have our main class which is called the main activity dot Kotlin KT, and that's where all our code goes into. When you're doing more high advanced applications, you separate every like different like function into different Kotlin files, and you can connect those functions using different inheritance and encapsulation packages and libraries that come within Kotlin itself. So don't get intimidated. These are very easy once you like have like a knowledge of what's happening. So if you see here, this is also a package that it's importing, and this package compose materials 3. This has the text field package, so that comes gives you this function. So when we have this package inherited, we can use this function. So yeah. Here they're it's the same thing, and here they're just adding the styling. So they're setting the max width of that search bar, and also they're putting the height. So if we don't declare this, it will just give like the something that's like default and not going to match with our previous design, like the design we made. So we have to match our design with what's showing on the application. So that's how we set our width and height depending on what's shown on our design. Okay, so here they're further on they're adding to the tree. So it's like a tree has like the branches, and the branches keep on growing. So first we created our actual like widget, which is our text bar and search icon. So then they're adding colors, then they're adding sizing, and then they're adding the icon, which is like this like icon that was added into this. And so when we add things, that's how we build our specific like item. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. Next thing is alignment. So when you see an application, like any application you open, Google, ChatGPT, any game, everything is aligned in a single line or in alignment that makes sense. And when things are not aligned, the application doesn't make sense and your users will get confused and then they'll uninstall your app. So you don't want people to uninstall your application. So you have to keep your app in a good and understandable alignment. And for that we have functions as well. So everything you want in your application always has a function. So if you're building something, just think, okay, I'm going to create this app. It has this many columns, this many lists, some images, some text. And then when you want to add those items, you just ask Google, which function do I need to add a text? Which function do I need to add image? And then you can easily find the function that you need. So basically for text, it's just a simple text. It's as easy as that gets. String resources, like different data types that we have in programming, int, string, float, decimal, all of those are also in Kotlin. So anything that you're thinking of is already in this language. You just need to push everything together. You need to make a puzzle, like finish the puzzle, and that's how you create your application. So you see, Android development is a very like fun and creative process where we can develop anything that's in our imagination. And maybe as to pose like other types of development, Android has a very satisfying end result where you can show to the layman person that anyone that has a phone, and that's basically everyone in the world has a phone, maybe except few, and anyone can access what you have built. So think about that margin of users that could get their hands on your application. All you need to know is how to put this puzzle together, and it's not even a puzzle because everything is already out there. So you just need the idea and you need passion, and that's how you make your application. So yeah. So back on topic. we have, okay, this is the composable function. So that's where our UI is being made. And here they're adding a column. So column is like how we are aligning things. So we have two types of alignments. We have columns, which I hope everyone knows what rows and columns are. Columns are vertically aligned elements, and rows are horizontally aligned elements. So all the elements are aligned like side by side or up and down. That's for columns. So when I'm making this list, I am making this widget, this element, you can see that this image is on top of this and the text is below it. So if you can visualize, this is actually a column of elements. So this is under this, and that forms a column. If this was a row, then this text would be here and not below it. So that's how the difference between rows and columns in alignments works. So this body that we're building. So that's what the column function is doing there. Okay, and okay, so they're adding a masking clip. So before image was like this, it was a square. But you can see like in Instagram, we have their stories options and everyone's like profile pictures are circles. But when you're adding your image isn't automatically a circle, right? It's a square or rectangle. So this is what masking means. So masking basically takes your image and puts it on top of a shape size and shape type, which in this case, it's a circle. And that circle is then either then that circle has your image like overlaid on top of it. So that's what the masking effect does. And that's clipping. So it's clipping their image onto that shape. And I think we all have done this before. There's different types of ways you can put your image onto that shape. You could fit it, so it's the original size of the image. You can fill it, so filling like stretches your image in a way that fills that shape, and then you can crop it. So it's like basically it's like a zoomed in version, so you get the main subject in that particular clipping. And all of these, this it's all defined here. Dot clip circle shape. So that means that this circle shape is going to come in our image. Like our image here is going to be a circle of 88 size, and it's being modifier. It's a modifier. Modifier means anything that can change is defined as a modifier. Okay. And here we have different like ways we can align our elements. So we have column, which has three types: start, center horizontally, and end. So when you're aligning in a column, it could be in the beginning, it could be in in the center, or it could be in the end. And then same for row: top, center, vertically, and bottom. And then for box is like the body in which the elements were added on top of it. So we have top start, top center, top end, center start, center end, bottom start, bottom center, bottom end. This all, whatever you add here depends on your UI design. So I hope you all are forming this image of how you can translate your design into an application, because that's the main point of figuring out the layout of your application, is how the design translates into code. So you can see here, this is like the size of every element. This many defined that many like pixels in between, and then that is our code. You can also like preview this in your preview function, so you can see how big or how small the application is. Okay, let's go on to the next topic. Material surface. Material surface. So I think from the name itself, you can understand that it's the surface on which the elements are added onto. So yeah, you can see here, it has this, they have added this like font colors. The background is a deep gray. They also have like this rounded borders. And that's all our different like material definitions that we have defined here. So yeah. Here in the row, they have defined, yeah, this is a row. You can see the image is here, the text is on the side of it. So that's a row. And this row has two elements, an image and a text. And this, okay, so when you're adding resources, this resource Okay, it's kind of different from how we add resources in and assets in web development, but it's kind of the same also. So in Android Studio, okay, so let's close all of these. For resources, you have this res folder. In this res folder, you have different other folders. When you're starting with a new application, you just have three of them. You have drawable, XML, and values. These rest were added on later, but this is how you store your resources. So I have my different objects, like the images and the icons are stored here. Okay, this is an image. These are icons. These icons are defined in XML code, so it makes a vector. So if you know the difference between raster and vector items, that's basically what it is, a vector image defined in XML. Okay, some more images. So that's how you store resources. So that's images. You can have your own fonts here. So this has a font called Carla and Montserrat. Montserrat is a very commonly used font in design and Android development and web development everywhere basically. It's by Google, so you'd see this come a lot in your development process. So just have it installed, and that helps. You also define the layout. So when you're defining a layout here, it's basically how the sizing of the application works. And this layout that we defined here, we can just call it anywhere else in our application, and that is how our application can be reused. So this one layout that we have defined here, this layout can be reused in other places as well. Yeah. We also have our navigation here. So like this is how you can connect one page to another page. This is like a tree structure. So there are two components, and this tree is like it's a branching effect again. So we are connecting these two. So from nav home, nav profile is connected, and that's navigation. So navigation compared to like React development in Android, it's a bit easier, not that easy. Navigation is always everyone's number one problem I've seen that when it comes to development is how do you connect one page to the other page. That's the biggest in other than in like simple vanilla JS. Everywhere else, it's kind of a problem. So Android has this like drag and drop feature that makes navigation a bit more easier than compared to other forms of development that don't have this Android Studio interface like React. So yeah, that's how you do navigation. You have values, and values are where our colors are stored. So like these specific colors, all color is always defined in this code called hex code. And so when we're using like when we're making an app, we want to have our colors like all the same everywhere. We don't want to have any variations in our colors. So we define our code here, the hex code, and we give it a variable name. And this name we can use anywhere else in our Kotlin, and that same color would come there. So yeah, so that's for values. And then yeah, let's go back to our code lab. Okay, here you can see that this alignment it's like stretched and doesn't look very good. So they have to fix the sizing of this row, and they have to fix the alignment of this text, and that's how that would be better. So yeah, here they have cropped the image and they have made it smaller, I believe. Yep, content scale dot crop. That's how they have cropped this. This is like the default size of the image. You don't want the entire image to be shown in our app, so we always have to like scale it down and then crop it as well. Okay, next. Okay, so this is how they have aligned this row of elements. So these are the clipped icons that we saw earlier with the text below it. So this icon and the text, that's a column. And then everything is all in one row. And that row, they have a scrolling effect. It's a scrollable function that they have used. So when you swipe on it, like it has this like scrolling effect. Yeah. And the scrolling effect, this row that they have listed all the items in, that's called the lazy row. There's also lazy column. You might be thinking why they are calling it lazy. This so far nothing in this process looked very lazy. So thankfully we have bit time to rest here, because the lazy row and lazy column functions allow us to easily define a row and list our items. We don't have to like go to the hustle of adding every element on our own manually. We just create a lazy row, and then we have our data set of all those elements, and those elements are being added here in this item. So it's collecting those data. Okay, this data that's going inside our items, and all these items are then added to lazy row. So that makes our process of making a list much easier than how it was before. So that's what lazy list and lazy columns, lazy rows, that's what it does. This is different ways it can like the rows can swipe and stretch. So it's all defined here, like equal weight. So you can see when you're swiping it, every element is like swiped in a every element has the defined width that they're swiping in. So that's equally defined and distributed. And in space, they have the spacing here. And you can see that every element is not going outside the bond that it was defined in. So this boundary is also something that we define how much the boundary has to be. So the same thing but in columns. So yeah, depending on how you want your application to look, you have different ways the list can scroll. Next. Okay, favorite collection grid, lazy grids. Okay, we saw lazy rows and lazy columns. Lazy grids are basically, if you know what a grid is, it's a combination of rows and columns. That's how grids are made. So it's the same thing. We have our grid, and these grids are defined in cells. So grid cells, and number of like rows we have is here. So that's what's defined in this, the number of rows in our grid. But here, the number of columns is how much our data is having. But our rows will always be 2 items. So the rows is not being changed. It's just the amount of columns that are being added on depending on how much data you have. And okay, so I think that's about it for what I'll show in this session. Do you guys have any questions? For beginners, I will send all of these resources once again on the WhatsApp group. I hope everyone is on the WhatsApp group. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Are you on the WhatsApp group? Great. Good, good. Okay. So everything will be there. I will be there. If you have any questions, you can just simply ask me, and if I'm available, I will respond as fast as I can. So I hope, does anyone have any questions?
Excuse me.
Yes,
Hi.
come again.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yep.
Like, this is mostly, I think, is there a no-code solution to building Android apps?
You want a no code solution. Okay. Are you aware of Flutter development?
Yeah.
So Flutter is it's like a framework of application development, and Flutter kind of works the same way that Android does, but except Android it just works on Android devices, right? Flutter works on both Android and iOS. And recently, Flutter has something called flutterflow.io, I believe, and that's a drag and drop interface, and it gives you like the code as well. So this is something I have not looked into much, but it does exist. So you could try it out. So I participate in a lot of hackathons, and my team, we mostly use React or Flutter. So we don't really use Android for hackathon purposes. So Flutter Flow is where a lot, like you can even collaborate with other people in the same platform. And so if you want a no-code solution, I think Flutter Flow is the most stable that it can be. But the problem is it is Flutter, and Flutter is kind of problematic in itself. Okay, no offense to Flutter developers, but Flutter keeps on deprecating and having like new packages. And recently I was making a game using Flutter's game engine called Flutter Flame. And then the swipeable object in that frame deprecated. So my game is on halt. I think I have to shift to Unity. But yeah, okay, I think my Wi-Fi is not loading this, but I'll send you this link and you can try it out. So okay, there's like a preview here. Oh, they have the code as well. So if you want like higher functionalities or add the backend, you can do that here. But you can see here too, right? That here they're manually, not manually, drag and dropping, no coding the process. So yeah, hope that answers your question. This is a good solution. I think if you just Google it, mostly these no code solutions, they have like a paywall. So once you're done, they might ask for payment or only like 2 or 3 pages are free. So it depends on how big of your application is, how big of a project you're building. If you're building a small application, okay, it's fine. But if you're building like your own brand, your own company, you don't want to use a no code builder because you need the most like you need the most freedom in your application. You don't want to be restricted in any way. So yeah, so depending on that, this is a solution. Any more questions? Okay, so can I get a thumbs up? Did everyone understand what we talked about in this session? Do you want more sessions? Because this thing is, I'm in my final year of BTech CSE at Amity Mumbai. So I would be here for only 2 more months, and that's as much as you get of me in GDG. But I'll be always like here on alive. So yeah, if you ever need any help after I'm graduated, I will be free, I hope. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed and see you maybe, I don't know, depends. Bye.